Good morning. We start this morning with general questions. Our first question from Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it evaluates the delivery of alcohol and drug services.
Minister Joe Fitzpatrick.
Rights, Respect and Recovery, published in November 2018, sets out a national strategy for tackling alcohol and drug harm. This includes an 8-point treatment plan for treatment and recovery, which will improve access to effective services and interventions to support individuals to achieve their recovery. In October last year, in partnership with COSLA, we published an action plan to deliver this strategy, and local areas are required to have their own strategies in place by April of this year. NHS Health Scotland has been commissioned to draw up a monitoring and evaluation framework for the strategy, which will sit alongside the existing evaluation of the alcohol framework.
Ruth Maguire.
Thank the Minister for that answer. I've raised before the slightly opaque nature of how funding is allocated between clinical and recovery programmes. How will the Scottish Government ensure accountability and transparency around funding and delivery of outcomes so that successful community-based recovery initiatives like recovery cafes that are running in Ayrshire, which provide not only practical support but also hope and purpose, can be scaled up for the benefit of my constituents?
Minister.
Thank the member for her question. Recovery cafes play a key role in supporting people's recovery from problem alcohol and drug use. They're led by people in recovery for others in recovery and demonstrate the impact that people with lived experience can have in supporting others in their recovery. And the Scottish Recovery Consortium has played a key role in development of these cafes across Scotland, and I'm very much a supporter of that. As I said in my first answer, NHS Health Scotland are leading the evaluation of our Rights, Respect and Recovery strategy through the evaluation framework. So that's going to be published in February. The framework will be used to monitor and evaluate progress against commitments and outcomes from rights, respect and recovery on an ongoing basis. That's going to sit alongside the existing framework for alcohol prevention framework, but I think it's important that it goes further than just looking at medical support for people in recovery, but also at that kind of wider wraparound, which I think very much includes recovery cafes and other such initiatives, and some of which are doing fantastic work and maybe don't get quite the recognition that they deserve.
David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What plans does the Government have to introduce a social responsibility levy on alcohol retailers, which was passed by this Parliament but not approved, which would provide millions more for alcohol and drug services?
Minister.
Well, the member has raised this point before, and the member will be aware that I support the fact that this is a power that we have. The power is intended to recoup any additional profit from the alcohol industry as a cause of minimum unit pricing, and I think we have to accept that it will take some time before we understand whether that exists now. But the member has made this point before, and I'm sure he will make it again. And you know, I don't find myself in disagreement. I think it's just about making sure that we are taking actions based on evidence, and don't quite have the evidence to support taking that action just yet.
Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What assessment have the ministers made with regards to the impact of the loss of drug and alcohol rehab beds? In 2007, there were 352 beds available across Scotland. Today, there are just 70.
Minister.
Across Scotland, drug and alcohol partnerships will be shaping their services according to local circumstances, and I know that particularly in Glasgow there has been a major reshaping of recovery services there in terms of to focus on folk who need that particular acute support, and there is a shift towards more community recovery. That said, I am currently, and my officials are currently looking across Scotland to map what recovery, what rehabilitation support is available, so we can see that whether there are gaps and how we then take that forward.
Thank you. Question number 2, Jamie Halcro-Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the delivery of foundation apprenticeships.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
Foundation apprenticeships started with the early Pathfinders in 2014-15. Over the first 3 cohorts and the Pathfinder phase, there have been 3,454 FA starts. Skills Development Scotland will publish the next annual progress report on foundation apprenticeships by March 2020, including details of the current cohort.
Jamie Halcro-Johnson.
Thank the Minister for that answer. While we await the figures, as he mentioned, in March, it's clear from the last cohort measured that there's been a huge variability in uptake across Scotland. Some areas, over 5% of S4 pupils took part. However, in others, including my own region of the Highlands and Islands, the numbers were negligible, 0.7% in Murray, 2.5% in Orkney, and fewer than 5 starts in Shetland. So can the Minister tell me whether this is a question of places available or insufficient demand in those areas? And can he further commit to improving these figures to ensure that foundation apprenticeships are not only available, but signposted and actively encouraged to young people across the whole of Scotland?
Minister.
Well, on his latter point, I certainly agree we should be ensuring everyone signposts young people to the opportunity of a foundation apprenticeship. I'm afraid, in terms of his overall question, he seems somewhat misinformed. We have seen, since the first cohort to the third cohort, a 343% increase in the number of starts. We've met our commitment to provide 5,000 opportunities by 2019. This year, in terms of the Highlands and Islands, if you look at the local authority areas that comprise the Highlands and Islands area, actually the number of FA starts is broadly in proportion to population, actually slightly higher per capita. So we're seeing here in Scotland growth in foundation apprenticeship starts, growth in modern apprenticeship starts, growth in graduate apprenticeship starts. If you look, though, to Tory England, since the introduction of the apprenticeship levy, figures, which was introduced, of course, by the Tories, without consultation with this government, figures as at the first 3 quarters of the 2018-19 academic year compared to numbers for the first 3 quarters of the academic year prior to the introduction of the apprenticeship levy, saw a decrease in the number of apprenticeship starts of 29.3%. In the same intervening period of time, across the range of apprenticeship starts in Scotland, we've seen an increase of 11.7%. Michelle Ballantyne, sitting next to Mr Halcro Johnston, had a question on apprenticeships last week. She was rather fortunate not to have that question reached. Mr Halcro Johnston has been less fortunate this week because his question was reached. We've placed that on the record. Let me say to the Tories, apprenticeships are not the most fertile line of inquiry for them as a party.
Question number 3, Neil Findlay.
To ask the Scottish Government if it will establish a Mesh Injured Women's Fund.
Cabinet Secretary Jeane Freeman.
Both the First Minister and I appreciate the impact that mesh complications have had on those affected and their families, not least in light of the meetings that the First Minister and I held with mesh-injured women in November. And we want to ensure that all available care and treatment options are open. With the needs of affected women uppermost in mind, we will consider the range of services and support that are available. As part of this year's budget process, I am currently exploring the different forms of support that could be offered beyond the provision of direct care services. I think it is important that this work recognises the impact this has on the lives of the women affected, and this is what I will be seeking to reflect.
Neil Findlay.
Mesh-injured women have lost their jobs, their relationships, their income and their homes, and they're having to pay for incontinence products, clothing, bedding and other items to try and manage the horrendous consequences of mesh implantation. Will the Cabinet Secretary actively speak to the Finance Secretary to set up a fund to help these women who are being financially penalised through no fault of their own? And will she speak to the First Minister and ask her to respond to the letter I sent following the meeting that the Minister referred to in Glasgow, as I've not received a reply since November?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm sure Mr Findlay listened carefully to what I said, and what I said implied that is part, actually it didn't imply I said it, it was part of the budget process that I was looking at all the services and support that is appropriately and should be there to support the women that he is referring to, and that includes those women that both the First Minister and I met. It wouldn't be responsible in the middle of a budget process for me at this point to begin to commit new funds whilst I'm still engaged in that exercise, including with the Finance Secretary. And of course, the budget, when it finally does come, will be a decision of this Parliament. So I would hope that if we are able to introduce those matters that Mr Findlay rightly cares about, he will find himself able to support that budget. In terms of the First Minister's response to Mr Findlay, of course, the First Minister is rightly waiting to see what it is that I intend to bring forward so that the reply to Mr Finlay can be as full as possible. And I have now given where we are in that process, and I hope that he is content with that. Indeed, I hope he welcomes it.
Question number 4, Gordon Lyndhurst.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that a record number of people are waiting over 12 hours in A&E departments.
Cabinet Secretary Jeane Freeman.
In November, attendances at our emergency departments were over 11% higher than they were 4 years ago, and that includes an almost 5% increase in the latest year. Whilst against this significant increase in demand, our NHS emergency department staff continue to deliver the highest performance of all nations in the UK, now for 4.5 years. Nonetheless, the level of 12-hour delays have increased in our key sites. To support the immediate reduction in those delays, I have continued with the work on a whole system response, intensified the focus on that with additional financial support to look at what more we need to do to ensure sustainability and robustness in our out-of-hours provision, commissioned further work to understand better why we have that high level of increased attendance, and of course continue to work with my partners in local government to ensure that we minimise delayed discharge and the flow through the hospital in order to free up beds for those patients appropriately attending A&E and therefore admitted into hospital for further treatment.
Gordon Lyndhurst.
The SNP's own target of 95% of patients dealt with within 4 hours has not been met in the last 2.5 years. So can the Cabinet Secretary give a guarantee to people with all the other issues facing the SNP-run NHS in Scotland when we can see a continual sustained improvement over a length of time on this issue?
Cabinet
Oh,
Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I've got to admire Mr Lyndhurst's bravery. I tell you what will happen with this government's target. We'll keep it, unlike your government south of the border. Not only will we keep it, Mr Lyndhurst, we will continue to work to meet it, but can I remind you that the NHS in Scotland, in emergency A&E work, our staff continue to be the best performing across the UK for 4.5 years. And I'll tell you what else this SNP government will do, Mr Lyndhurst. We will listen to the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, who are very, very clear. I would simply wish that your Secretary of State would listen. He might care to reply to any of my letters over the last 18 months, by the way. We will listen to the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, who tell us that that target matters and that it should be kept. So we will continue to work towards that target. We will continue to be the best performing NHS in the UK. We will continue to have a single system NHS, which your colleagues south of the board continue to break up. And we will keep that target, unlike your colleagues south of the border who intend to abandon it. And by the way, the reason I mention your colleagues is because you and those others sitting in the benches want to run our health service in Scotland. God help us if that day ever comes.
Question number 5, Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the potential impact on Scotland-based armed forces personnel and their families, what its response is to any UK involvement with US military action against Iran.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
The Scottish Government would be concerned about any further escalation resulting in military action. We continue to urge all parties to refrain from further violence and work to de-escalate tensions. Further conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests. We recognise the value of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and the impact this agreement has had on peace and stability in the region. We support the continued commitment of the UK, France and Germany to this agreement, as seen in the E3 statement on the 12th of January. And it is right that the E3 are raising concern at the US decision to reimpose sanctions on Iran and are urging Iran to refrain from further military action and to return to its commitments under the agreement. The Scottish Government believes that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is the best avenue we have to prevent nuclear proliferation and de-escalate tensions in a peaceful manner. And we understand that the European powers now have triggered the formal dispute mechanism over Iran's breaches of key parts of the 2015 agreement.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Cabinet Secretary will aware of the irresponsible comments from the Prime Minister earlier this week, who says he believes that the Iran deal, the deal that the Cabinet Secretary just referred to, should be abandoned and replaced with, I quote, a Trump deal. Instead of playing the role of Trump's lapdog, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the UK Government should be advocating the benefits of the current deal and working with all sides to gain their recommitment to a deal that makes the type of conflict that we all fear less likely?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, the Scottish Government is concerned that the UK Government is sending mixed messages. The Prime Minister made his comments on the same day the UK, as part of the E3, activated the formal dispute mechanism of the current agreement and stated publicly, and I quote, their overarching objective of preserving the agreement. So if this can lead to the reactivation of all elements of the agreement, this offers the best prospect of preventing nuclear proliferation by Iran. So we support the comments of the EU High Representative, recognising the agreement as a significant achievement of multilateral diplomacy and reiterating the importance of the preservation of this in light of heightened tensions.
Question number 6, Michelle Ballantyne.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made on resolving the issues preventing the opening of the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People in Edinburgh.
Cabinet Secretary Jeane Freeman.
We remain on track to deliver against my previously announced timescales of spring for the move for DCN and autumn for the move to the new Royal Hospital for Children and Young People. All actions relating to medical gases and drainage are now complete. Good progress is being made with ventilation, electrical issues, fire safety and water. The Senior Programme Director continues to ensure that the facility will be fit for occupation and is overseeing the NHS Lothian Action Plan. The Oversight Board, chaired by the Chief Nursing Officer, continues to oversee the work to ensure that the hospital is safe and is delivered as planned.
Michelle Ballantyne.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Cabinet Secretary has been very keen to suggest that the Scottish Government has no responsibility for this debacle. But the fact remains that the capital finance was provided by the Scottish Government and they were responsible for the due diligence checks on that spend. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that because the building contract was signed off when it was handed over, the original contractors and others that have been approached are not willing to take on the work as they would become liable for both the building and the warranties? And as a result, the cost of sorting out this mess is now soaring.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm not entirely sure where Ms Ballantyne has been in all the discussions we've had around this, or where she has been in doing her homework as a member of the Health and Sport Committee to understand how we undertake infrastructure projects in Scotland and why we are now changing that. And the negotiations, because the contract is appropriately between NHS Lothian, appropriately and in legal terms, between NHS Lothian and those contractors, and the work now is underway in order to ensure that the site is safe and is fit for purpose when it meets those moves, as I've outlined, in spring and in autumn. Therefore, the discussions between contractors and that body responsible are discussions between NHS Lothian and the contractors. And the Oversight Board is concerned with ensuring that the work is done on time. And as I've said, we are on track to deliver that work so that the hospital, which I halted the move to, as I'd remind Ms Ballantyne and others, because it was not safe for patients or staff, the right decision by me, that hospital will be able to be opened both in spring for DCN and autumn for the Royal Hospital. And at that point, we will be assured as a government, as we should be, as the Health Secretary, as I should be, that it is safe for both patients and staff.
Thank you very much, and that concludes general questions.